plugin of the week is the Lindell 254E. This is an emulation of the famous Neve 2254 bus compressor. It was actually a compressor created in 1969 by Rupert. There were a few different variations of it. One that had a threshold, like you see here. There were others that didn't have a threshold. It had just input and output levels, and it had a fixed threshold, so you kind of worked with it accordingly. But most of them had the same basic features. You had ratio settings of 1.5, 2, 3, 4, and 6 to 1. You had a fast and slow attack setting on the limiter. You have only a fast attack setting on the compressor, which is kind of where coming into the plugin realm, you get some extra goodies that you don't normally get with this, and that's a couple of the added features that are here. So we have a fast attack, which is the normal 5 millisecond fast attack, and then there is a slow attack, which actually decreases down. I'm not exactly sure. They don't say anywhere in the documentation where it does. On the slow fast attack here, you get the fast attack again 5 milliseconds, which is kind of quite slow for a limiter. But on the slow side, which is sort of weird, it actually has a varied or more of a program dependent attack. And I'm not exactly how that actually works in terms of the whole processing stage, but it actually comes across in the mix. Now, what you have over here is a meter, an in-out switch. So this just gives you the ability to kind of take the processor in and out of the circuit, so we can drag that up or down accordingly. The meter here will show input level, output level, or control, which is gain reduction. So if you're looking at the level, then you'll see that in the -12 to +12 range. It's set up to be calibrated to -18 dBFS. So if you actually take 22, subtract 22 off the number that you see here, then you will end up with a dBFS reading that would be accurate to what you're working with. And I'll kind of get into that in a little bit. So with a -18 dBFS, that would actually, if you set the limiter to +4, then effectively no signals would go above -18 dBFS, and then it allows you to go plus or 8 dB higher than that. So even at its max setting, the limiter still is cutting into the top 6 dB or so of your dynamic range. Now, you also have a makeup gain control and a threshold. So on some of the original or older versions of this, you had an input level and an output level, and no threshold setting. So you would get those kind of variations. You see that in the V-Comp and Waves version of it. There's also a limit recovery, which you see here, and a compressor recovery time. So you can work with it here. What's interesting here is that they added in a setting. So the original has 400, 800, 1.5, and an auto setting, which is a program dependent setting. It's staged, has 2 stages of release, an initial quick release of like 50 milliseconds, and then a longer release time, which is closer to 5 seconds in total. Same type of thing here. It's very much a broadcast type of limiter, where they don't want the gain reduction to recover too quick, because then you might get a snapback if there's an area of silence. So it gives you that sort of 5 seconds of slowly going back to the original, because the broadcaster or whatever is going on, someone will be talking or something, some other event will come up that will keep it from going down too far or recovering too much, and you end up adding in a ton of noise. Now, what's amazing about this broadcast limiter as it was originally designed is that when it was brought into the studio, it really brings a very warm, rich, ballsy kind of characteristic, which is how it got used. It's amazing for compressing drums, compressing basses. The Neve transformers and the way that they're designed have a really rich low-mid range, which is really the power and the essence of the Neve sound, I believe, is all kind of predominantly driven from that. This is sort of an unusual limiter in that it's a bridge diode limiter. And so there's a bias circuit which tells the diodes how to control the gain, which is basically how the circuit works, and it has a unique sonic characteristic that is really uniquely different from FET compressors or optical compressors or tube compressors. So it has its real its own character to it. So let's start by kind of putting this on a mix bus and having a little bit of a listen here and kind of working with it from there. So where we can use this, let's start by using this in a couple ways, and it'll show you how I can kind of bring out some of the organic character here. In a mix bus situation, I might be more likely, although not necessarily, to go to an auto setting. What's really cool here is the first setting I'm going to put in here is one that doesn't exist on the original unit, which is 100 millisecond release time. So I could go to kind of a lighter ratio and do a little bit of a kind of pumping and breathing kind of thing. Now this is kind of unique because it's not necessarily the original characteristic of it. I'm going to leave the limiter off here for a second and just kind of work with a slower attack, faster release, and see if we can get kind of like a nice soft pump. So what you could hear is like a nice richness that's added to the low and low mids, and that's kind of like where it images really solidly. And that's like a real perfect kind of thing. So with these additional things, you get a little bit more of kind of a pumping and breathing characteristic. You can also get a very similar thing from the auto setting. If you kind of work here, we'll kind of work with a slightly higher ratio. Let's go 2:1. What happens is, though, it's multi-stage. So this is going to allow us to give a little bit more gain reduction, but kind of have it even out a little bit. So I'm going to keep with the slow attack setting, and let's just kind of work with this and see if we can get it to kind of pump with a little bit more gain reduction.
To tell you, you're scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving here before it goes wrong. Don't you know you can't keep running from where you belong? You say you're leaving again, oh yeah, and I'll find you again. Don't make believe or lie, pretend, oh yeah. And I'll find you again. No river to run or mountain to hide. I won't let goodbye be a final reply. Baby, we're far from the end. So come on, baby, let me help you believe.
I'm actually going to go to a higher ratio here.
Come on, baby.
See if I can capture a little bit more of the Neve essence.
'Cause I will stay here for as long as you need. Don't keep pushing away, 'cause the stories they tell you are just meant to scare you from being here with me where you belong. Tell me what would I do if robbed of your smile? So if you now tell me you're gone, remember the words in this song.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I sometimes forget to zoom in on the plugin. So anyway, be kind to me here if you've only made it through the first 5 minutes of the video. So that's one other way to kind of work it a little bit. And this has kind of like a smoothing characteristic that is really like a kind of finishing type of thing where it really pulls a mix together. And I think you could really feel this. The way that it kind of gels the mix a bit together, pulls some things together, and just that getting into the higher gain reduction settings can be really, kind of bring out a bit more of the characteristic of what this limiter does. Like for example here, I have a drum stem here. So I'm going to take this off and then just kind of work more specifically with just the drums, just to kind of give you an idea of a classic way in which this is used. And this is like a real kind of old school rock and roll kind of limiter. So I'll go here to, and even if I go to like a faster attack here, And I'll stay on the auto release setting. As you work into different gain reduction ranges, what you want to really pay attention to here is the movement within that stage, because this is really where you're going to get it. Your makeup gain here will reflect what it is. So it's in 2 dB stages, 2, 6, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So notice the depth that's added into here. And the solidity of the bass. And what you're really looking for is this gain reduction movement. As you kind of work in with the ratio, you'll find, and this is the way that the original unit kind of works, that there are certain areas where you get certain types of characteristic sounds that kind of follow with the different ratios. So as you go to a lighter ratio, you may find that you get a little bit more pumping and movement in the bottom couple of dB of gain reduction, and so you kind of set your threshold accordingly. As you kind of go up into the 3, 4, 6 to 1, you may find that you're working your way more into the 3 to 6 or 6 to 8 dB of gain reduction, which sort of seems like, well, wow, that's a lot of gain reduction. But it is really, as you kind of drive it, you don't necessarily want to get caught up in the total amount of gain reduction that you're getting, as much as what the end result is. And that's where the multi-stage release of the auto setting kind of comes in. So, if you're working with individual instruments, for example, like if you're working with the bass here. So if I take this out here, and call up a Lindell setting right here. So what I have here is like a 4 to 1 limiter, couple dB of gain reduction, threshold with an 800 millisecond release. And let me see if I enable my groups here. I should be able to bypass both of these. So these are linked together, the settings. Right? You can really just feel like the depth and the openness and the imaging that kind of comes in. And it's easier to go with sort of the more complex, the more I find that going to an auto release setting kind of works a little bit better. Or if you work it on a vocal, where the vocal may have more change between more busier sections rhythmically with more phrases or words, and then open sustained sections, this gives you a nice balance of being program dependent or responding to the original signal. Whereas if you're, what I find with this is I'm working on drums and things of that nature specifically, I may be working with, like on a kick drum or a snare drum with a faster release settings, and kind of working with that and finding the right ratio and dynamic settings that kind of work with that. This is a type of a limiter that you don't just pick up and like everything necessarily automatically sounds like amazing. It may just straight off. You have to kind of work and learn how the beast basically works inside of it. And that requires a bit of experimentation and kind of working with it, working with some of the different settings, and also kind of playing with some of the different attack and release settings. The limiter is also very valuable when you're getting, to the mix or more complex stages where you want to really control the output level. The thing to be conscious of is that a setting of plus 12 is going to basically work everything pretty much above, like minus 10 dBFS. So be conscious of that your input level is you may need to lower it coming into this. Otherwise, you may find that the limit level is kind of getting pushed a little bit heavy. And you have a separate on and off section. It also has some unique features that you don't have with the original. One is a filter on the side chain of the compressor, and what that's really amazing for is sometimes you'll find that low end sustain instruments like basses, if they're really loud in the mix, will keep the compressor from pumping and moving. It'll keep it in a sort of a steady saturation or gain reduction state. And by filtering off some of that and kind of working with this, you can go all the way up to 400 cycles, which is pretty crazy. And that allows you to kind of filter off and make it more respond a bit more dynamically to the music. So that's something that didn't exist with the original. And then you could get into heavy compression and work with the wet dry control. There are so many ways to show off this limiter, and it's a really powerful one. It's one of my favorite. It's an all-time classic limiter, and these sort of rock and roll sound from that era of the 70s. That was just such a huge part of so many records. They actually came out with a rack mount version, the 2264, which was sort of a rack mounted version that would actually fit into the channel strips, and eventually found its way into external racks and come out. And it's basically this limiter put into a smaller form factor, and it still somehow works. Well, anyway, it's a really cool one. One of my favorite limiters and a very good emulation of it. I like it. It's not hyped. It's actually really true to the sonics and characteristics of the original, which is something that I really love. And the additional features are very welcome and helpful, including the faster release times, wet dry control, and the sidechain filter. That makes it that much more flexible for instrument use as well as full mix use. And a really great processor. Plugin of the week is the Lindell 254, now part of Plugin Alliance.